All right. Well, here we are. Welcome to our Leadership Connection webinar series. Today, we are addressing an interesting topic, international business mission. We have a special guest today, Dr. John Cragin, and I'm Dr. Jesus San Pedro. I serve as program director and associate professor for the Master of Arts in Leadership degree here at Mid-America Christian University, and passionately about connecting the dots between two things: leadership, thinkers, practitioners, and those opportunities that we have to go out and transform and change the world. And we want to do it in a God-honoring way, and we want to make sure that we equip the leaders for their calling as they pursue their careers and they pursue what they were called to do. I'm here right now in my office in Oklahoma City, in our beautiful campus. And today I get to have again the honor to share this space and to co-host and to be moderator together with Dr. Kelly Resemy, who is a program director for the MBA program here at Mid-America, and she's a professor. And on behalf of our university and on behalf of our business school, we want to welcome to this new edition of our Leadership Connection webinar series. And well, Dr. Kelly, I'm really honored to share this space with you again.
Well, I'm honored to get to co-host this space with you, and very excited for our guest, Dr. Cragin, and all that he has to share with us about business in the global market. And that's what Leadership Connection is about. It's this monthly open space where local, national, and international organizational leaders and guest speakers connect and engage with each other and us, the audience, in transformative conversations around leadership topics. And I want to welcome our speaker as well as our community of colleagues from the fields of business, international ministries, and academics. Our audience plays a significant role in participating and sharing this forum with the business leaders in our community, in your community, wherever you are. I'm in Kansas City, and our campus is in Oklahoma, so we want to spread this everywhere. So please reach out to other faculty, friends, people that you know within your community. When you see Leadership Connection announcements, please share them on LinkedIn or through email. Each month, we host leaders from around the world who provide us with cutting-edge insights about Christian leadership. And our goal is to equip our audience with the latest and most relevant topics relating to leadership and building the kingdom of God. And we hope you enjoy this unique MACU leadership model of community learning. So we want to bring MACU to the world and the world to MACU. So I want to thank our ministry and corporate leaders for taking the time to join us. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And we are online, and even though we're live now, we do record it. So don't hesitate to share it with others or share it in your classrooms. Please schedule to join us every third Thursday of the month at noon Central Time for this hour where you can bring your lunch and learn. And be sure and stay to the end, because we have an opportunity for you to interact with our guests today, and be ready to ask questions. And if you stay and participate, you will be eligible to win a special gift. Thank you, Dr. San Pedro.
Wonderful. And before I introduce in detail the topic and our wonderful speaker for today, I want to remind everyone that MACU, Mid-America Christian University, has as part of the mission something that is related to today's webinar. Our mission implies that we are here to create, to collaborate, and to innovate, to solve local and global problems for the glory of God through Jesus Christ and the good of society. So our mission naturally calls all of us to make sure that we think globally, whether we do local work with a global mindset or we do global work with a global mindset. So becoming a global leader, I once heard, is only something we can gain by doing global work. As we do it, we gain insights. And today we're going to be enriched and blessed to hear from someone who have been literally all over the world doing global work. And we're going to grab some insights from him. I remember reading some time ago that Dr. Billy Graham said once, he said, I believe one of the next great moves of God will happen through the believers in the workplace. So the marketplace shares and opens up windows of opportunity that are unique, especially in the world we're living in. And businesses and business leaders can actually go to places where old-time missionaries wouldn't be able to go today. So there is something interesting to think through these and how God has called some individuals to do this kind of work. And that's what we're here for, to make sure that we awaken those who should be doing it and how to do it effectively and how to be equipped for that. And that's what we're going to talk today. So the topic for today is international business mission. And we will examine areas of the world where Christians and their message of hope are either embraced or rejected. We're also going to see some on how we can see strategies to overcome restrictions with locally beneficial business practices. And today's speaker is Dr. John Cragin. He's been a full professor for 30 plus years now at the graduate and undergraduate levels in the US and abroad. And he's got an extensive international executive business experience in places like Russia, like Europe, like South America, including my country, Venezuela. And we were just sharing before we started on a few anecdotes. And in China also, just to name a few of the countries he's been doing business with. And then he's got more than 25 publications and academic and professional journals and books. And he holds a PhD in management from the University of Oklahoma. So we're really honored to have you here today with us. And welcome and thank you for sharing the opportunity with all of us to learn from your own experience.
Well, thank you so much. Let me share my screen so we can get going here.
It works.
Okay, great. Let me begin by saying for sure, this session is not about me. It's about the one we serve, okay? The one who has all of our attention, all of our focus, and all of our commitment. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to share what I've been learning, but let's make it clear this is about him. So the topic is globalization, and we have seen some really significant changes in the last 20 years in particular. And we're going to focus on the challenges and the opportunities that exist because of the changes that have taken place in industry and government, healthcare, education. And of course, our focus in all of this is Acts 1:8, and I don't need to tell you what that passage says. I also don't need to share with you that our involvement in Acts 1:8 is often quite a mystery. That is to say, we find ourselves in different places and doing different things for him and with him, sometimes to our surprise. And I call this GPS, God's positioning system. And I want to just share a little bit about how that's worked out in my life in the hopes that maybe it'll bring some advantage to you as well. I am not from Oklahoma. I'm from California. Grew up there. My family was an U.S. Air Force family, and so we moved quite a bit. And the most important move that we made, that the GPS made, took me to Japan. When I was in Japan, for the first time in my life, a friend sat me down and said to me, "You're missing something extremely important." And what I was missing was eternity. What I was missing was a walk with Jesus Christ. I'd never heard the gospel. The first time I heard it, it came through to me very clear. And I prayed to receive Christ, and he received me into his family. And it radically changed my life in Japan. And also while I was in Japan, one of the gentlemen that had an influence on me and discipling me was the chaplain at the Air Force. And as I spent time in his place, I began to notice his daughter. His daughter today is my wife. Japan was a very important place for us. Then I moved to Oklahoma. To me, Oklahoma was very, very strange. I'd lived in the mountain states, and all of a sudden I could see a million miles. Why did I choose to go to college in Oklahoma? Very simple. The girl that had my attention was going to school in Oklahoma, and I was going to go wherever she was. I majored in one of those majors that people who don't know what they're going to do with their lives choose, and it was a fantastic time. When we graduated, like so many college students, we got married, right after graduation and moved around the States a little bit, but both of us wanted to go back to Japan, where everything started for us. And we tried very hard to work that out, but couldn't do it. And finally, I got a call one day from a gentleman that said, "I'm operating in another country in Asia, and if you come there, you'll have the opportunity you're seeking." So we accepted the opportunity to go to the Philippines. The Philippines is an amazing place. Everything about it was attractive. The people were so welcoming and so helpful. And it didn't hurt that most of them spoke English. My Tagalog wasn't all that great. And many, many important things happened to us when we were in the Philippines. But one of the most important happened just a few weeks after we arrived, when I left my pregnant wife in Manila and went to Korea. And this is where I was. This is called Expo 74, 1974. It's the largest gathering of Christians in one place in history. Oh, by the way, that's me right there. These 320,000 people from all over the world were coming together to encourage and share with one another how they could be more effective in sharing the gospel around the world. At that meeting, I also met a gentleman who drastically changed my life. He was Jun Jong Kim. And Dr. Kim was the one who put this whole thing together in combination with Billy Graham and others. I'll bring his name up a little bit later, but let me just say this. 3 months after this meeting, my eldest daughter was born. Her name is Kim. This is where we lived in the Philippines when I decided I couldn't stand Manila. So we moved up into the mountains into a city called Baguio City. And this is the view from my office. It was spectacular. I loved every minute of it. My 2 girls grew up here. And then this is what we did. From that location, I traveled extensively for 4 years to 14 countries. These are the countries that I spent a lot of time in. My responsibility was to build leaders and to teach them to be effective in not only running a business, but also using that business to make an impact for Christ. Now, there was one part of Asia that I could never go to. And I'll bet you looking at this map can guess where it was. And if you guess China, you're absolutely right. It was so frustrating to me that I was traveling all over Asia, and the place with nearly 2 billion people I couldn't go to. Because at that time, China was closed. There were no Americans there. There were no American businesses there. There were no flights going into China from anywhere. It was closed. And I looked in the scripture and I just couldn't find anything that said, go to all the world except China. And it frustrated me so much. I began to look at what was going on there and decided that if there was going to be a way ever to get into China, it probably was going to be through business. So I developed a very, very rough strategy: business training, consulting, and technology transfer. It was very rough. There was a young lady who worked at a travel agency in Hong Kong who called me one day when I was in Taiwan and said, John, the very first group being allowed across the river into China is leaving tomorrow. Can you get here? I jumped on a plane, got on a train in Hong Kong, went to the border, walked across the river on a bridge, got on another train and went to a city called Guangzhou. And in that city, I knew my vision was right. It would be possible to use business, if the country ever opened, to reach people for Christ. That was the plan. The problem was I didn't have any credibility and I had no credentials. I was planning on going to a country where elderly were honored, and I was maybe pretty close to 30. And so I was just a kid. And so I needed to develop the credibility and credentials for any plan that we were going to use to penetrate China. And I ended back up in the United States. And Becky and I went to the University of Oklahoma, which was clearly God's GPS for what happened there. And during the time that I was there, I not only got my PhD, but also worked as a consultant with major US companies all across the United States, helping to give me additional credentials that were important for what we were going to do next. The key, of course, was to get to Hong Kong. And to do that, I needed a job. I applied for several and was turned down consistently. And then one day, one of the organizations that turned me down, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, called me to say they changed their mind. The opportunity was there and they were desperately needing me. Becky and I had already packed. We were already on our way to Hong Kong when that call came. Again, God's GPS. Hong Kong is a spectacular place. We loved every minute of it. I was teaching MBA students who, most of whom went on to very, very significant careers, and trying to build an expatriate team of Australians, Americans, Europeans who would join me with the appropriate engineering and educational credentials to do consulting in China. While I was in Hong Kong, I consulted extensively with the Hong Kong/British government, Hong Kong Telephone, Cable and Wireless, the Sheraton hotel chain, Exxon Corporation, and several banks. That eventually caught the attention of some Chinese leaders who would occasionally visit into Hong Kong, and they invited us, our little small team, to go into China. And we had some breakthrough training opportunities and some critical connections. The training opportunities started in a little village called Shenzhen, right across the river from Hong Kong. And we trained 50 bankers. Now those, quote, bankers knew nothing about banking because there was no legitimate banking in China at the time. We had a very successful training operation there. And then about a month later, I was invited to come to Beijing. And in Beijing, I taught 120 long marchers. Long marchers are people who were with Mao Zedong during the time of the revolution. It was a fantastic time and opened up new doors so that about a month and a half later, we trained 1,200 Chinese leaders in the city of Changsha. which is in the province of Hunan, and that, of course, is Mao Zedong's hometown. Then I met this gentleman, A.C. To. He's a Singaporean, but he's really Chinese from Malaysia. During the revolution in China, he helped to supply the communists with ammunition, etc. And he made connections with everybody. His children went to school at UCLA and got medical degrees. And more importantly, they came to know Jesus Christ. They came back to Singapore to their dad and then said, "Dad, you've got to listen to this. It's so, so important." And they convinced him to go to one of the last Asian Billy Graham crusades. He went, he received Christ, and it dramatically changed his life overnight. Now, he was the head of Hitachi, a rather large corporation. And so he had housing in Hong Kong and Japan and London and the United States. And we made connection with him through some friends in Singapore, and he would come and visit us in Hong Kong. One day we were at his house asking for some help with regard to a piece of property we wanted to buy. And he said, "Just a minute, I'll go get my Hong Kong map." And he went and got his map and brought it out. And he sat down in front of us and he said, "Now, where's this property?" And we took a little while to find it, but we finally found it. And we said, "We've been trying to find who we can buy this from." And he looked at us and he said, "Okay, that's it. What are you guys doing? I own that property." At that point, we knew we had no point. There was no longer any way we could keep what we were doing from him. So we told him what we were doing in China and what our intention was to set up a large operation in China where we could do consulting and training. And he said, "That's what I've been doing for the last 2 years." He said, "I've got money, but I don't have people." We said, "We've got people, but we don't have money." We also met this gentleman, Dwight Nordstrom, and I put some links here for you in case you ever want to look it up. Dwight was part of our team in Chicago, helping to train our people who were coming to China. But eventually he became the leader of General Electric's first office in Beijing. From there, he became the head of the US-China Trade Corporation. And from there, today, runs 16 manufacturing operations in China. He's probably the most significant industrial leader from the United States that does business with China today. So he was a big influence on us. A great friend of mine today currently lives in McKinney in Texas. So with their help, we built this facility. This is 120,000 square feet of our office space, our housing, and our training facility for our staff team of about 40 and an additional 40 children. And we were doing training, consulting, tech transfer, a little bit of export. And of course, we had to have a company school because there were no schools for expatriate kids in China. So we put together a small company school for our 40 kids, where my 2 daughters attended as well. Then in 1989, those of you that are old enough will remember this picture. Tiananmen Square happened. And when Tiananmen Square happened, all of our clients were jumping on planes and leaving the country. It changed our business dramatically. We had to evacuate all of our women and children to Hong Kong. Things got so bad. We stayed, the guys stayed, and we made a commitment to the mayor of Tianjin that we were staying and we were going to continue to develop the economy in China. I went back to the United States to meet with one of our customers in Kansas City, as it happens, Kelly. And on my return back to China, I met with some people I had been discipling, about 10 or 15 Chinese young executives that I was discipling. And during that meeting, the door broke down, the public security bureau came in armed and arrested all of us. And they took me to this place. This is an interrogation room. I was familiar with it. We had prepared for this kind of thing. We knew that the work that we were doing would potentially cause problems. So anyway, I spent 24 hours in this interrogation chamber. Every 3 hours or so, a new team would come in. they would accuse me of nonsense, and I would explain to them what I was doing there. And in most cases, that led to God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life. And I would share the gospel with them, and then they would storm out. I was PNG'd, persona non grata, told immediately to leave the country. It made the newspapers in London, it made the newspapers in Hong Kong, made the Wall Street Journal, made newspapers in Singapore. So I was a goner. I was out of there. I couldn't do anything in China. So, but I would like to say this to you. The little school that we started for our kids became in such demand, starting with Motorola, that today it's called Life Plus Worldwide. And Life Plus Worldwide is in China, the Middle East and North Africa, Malaysia, bringing in $34 million a year, 2,500 students in 7 schools, and impacting tens of thousands of people for the gospel. I'm still on the board. But I had to leave and back to the United States of America, where for the next few years, I did teaching, international marketing director for a major manufacturing firm that was doing business with us in China as well. Started a company called Global Options International in Russia, and a company called Vertical Learning Curve, which has been used by Mid-America Christian University in the past. And I'm still on the board of Life Plus. We just had our board meeting last week. But I don't want to go into a lot of detail there, so I'm just going to skip it and say these countries were added to my list during that time. And one of the things that happened was, as I traveled around the world and worked with business leaders and mission leaders, I found out that business people had something to share with missions that they needed to hear. And it was called return on investment. You know, sometimes we refer to it as bang for your buck. And of course, it's the whole theme of the parable of the soils. It's the whole theme of the parable of the talents that Jesus gave to his disciples. Traveling around the world led to some insights about bang for your buck. I'll just share a little of those with you. Here's a very typical church. I did a lot of research on this, so I know it's accurate, with 200 adult members. As you can see, it's average of $500,000 budget. And you can see how that budget is broken down here. And if, just if, at the bottom, it says 100 of those 200 people, those 200 adults, shared the gospel with one person every week, then the cost per exposure would be $100. If 10% of those they share with responded to the faith, the cost per conversion would be $1,000. Just keep that in mind. Now, the typical mission team also researched, so I know this is accurate, of 4 families, okay, 8 adults, revenue of $400,000 via donations. Here's the expenses broken down. If they each, because they're evangelists, share the gospel 10 times per week, then the cost per exposure is $100, the same as it is for the church just a minute ago. If 20% of those, 1 in 5, respond in faith, then the cost per conversion is $500. Just keep those numbers in mind because they're extremely important as we think about reaching the world. Now, here's a part of the world that's sometimes called the 1040 window. And of course, it means those that are least reached. And there's a real problem here because we're not going to have that many churches and we're not going to have that much opportunity for traditional missions. So we've got to figure out other ways to work there. I want to give you an example. This is not the real name of the company, but it is what the company does. Personnel placement. And it's based in North Carolina. It was started by a church, by some guys in a church. And this is their budget. So you see the units sold. That in their case, they were selling qualified people to companies that are trying to hire them. Their price, their earned revenue, their breakdown of their income statement is here, and their return on investment of 14%. And this team of 5 shares Christ with 375 people average per year at no cost because it's all earned revenue. They started thinking about whether they could do that someplace else, and they did. They started an office in Dubai, in the Middle East. They sold a few less. Their price was a little bit higher. They had a team of 2, and they shared the gospel with 225 people on average per year at 0 cost because of earned revenue. Big time bang for the buck. A smaller example is Global Options International, a company I started that we set up in Moscow, Russia. This is the team. I don't want to tell you about the company, but I want to tell you about one person on the team, and that's Linda. The team was composed of all kinds of qualified people, and Linda didn't feel qualified. I said, Linda, well, what do you do? She said, I'm a hairdresser. What can a hairdresser do to reach the world for Christ? The #1 hotel in Moscow at the time was the Radisson, actually started by a gentleman from Oklahoma City who was later murdered by the Russian mafia. We went into partnership with him, and they had a hairdressing salon, but no foreign hairdressers. Linda became the #1 hairdresser in that #1 hair salon in Moscow. And she actually had the opportunity to share the gospel with more important people than the rest of the team combined. A hairdresser. So products and services, import, export, DFI, direct foreign investment. There are a lot of opportunities all around the world. Many of you are familiar with Lions Den DFW, which is an investment group that shares revenue with companies that have potential to make a profit and share the gospel around the world. If you're not familiar with Lions Den DFW, I encourage you to go online and take a look. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot more detail here, but there's so many examples that I can give to you. I've already mentioned Life Plus in China and Middle East. There's a gentleman in Texas who's investing hundreds of thousands of dollars around the world, making an impact for Christ. I have a friend, Alan, in Tennessee, whose company sells huge cranes all around the world and is impacting the world for Christ. My friend Jeff, who I'll meet with next week, is running a $2 billion company and $2 billion of investment in small businesses around the world that are focused on sharing the gospel. I have our friend in Bob, Dustin, Jeremy, Gene, and Dennis, all in Oklahoma, not far from you, that are using their businesses to communicate the gospel with their customers and their suppliers and their employees, making a huge impact at 0 cost of donations. The insight that I've been getting from this process is this. In the world today, there are 5 million full-time Christian workers. There are 500,000 full-time missionaries. Maybe I should stop and ask this question. What does that mean, full-time? If you're a professor, are you a full-time professor? How many full-time Christians are there? Well, Romans 10:14, as we all know, says they can't believe if they can't hear, and they can't hear if somebody doesn't tell them. Well, there are 6 billion people over 5 years old in the world today. Of those, 3 billion have yet to hear the gospel. There are 100 million adult evangelical Christians today. To get the job done, all we have to do is share the gospel with one person a week. It's that simple. Bang for the buck? Okay, we looked at the churches, we looked at the mission teams, we gotta have those. And for places they can't go, we're gonna need businesses. And we're gonna need businesses like the ones we mentioned in China or Russia. And here's another thing. I know an organization with 500 employees, roughly 1,750 students, and approximately 25 million earned revenue a year. That group of people can share the gospel with 100,000 every single year. And that's how we're going to get the job done. Now, let me wrap up and take whatever questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cragin. I appreciate it. Very enlightening journey you've been in, and now what a wonderful call to understand the calling that people might have in the marketplace and how relevant it can be to make a difference and to make the best investment. I'm sure, well, let's just open it up for any questions you might have. For those of you who are online, you get the privilege to have firsthand answers from him, and we're honored to be in the midst, kind of like moderating a little bit this. I really appreciate some of the things you mentioned, and there's always this opportunity, and before we get any questions, I wanted to just comment on the fact that it's exciting, and I connected a lot with the idea of what you've done and all the adventures it seems like you've gone as you have pursued your call. Not everybody is called to do global work. And if I may ask you, when did you know that it was God calling to do this kind of global work? When was it so? I know you mentioned but and also trying to help people. When can someone know that that the global thing is their thing? And the reason why I'm asking this is because, you know, in our programs, we have people here that when they get to see some courses on international business, they say, well, I don't know anything about any businesses around the globe. How can I know if this is my thing? So what would be some of your thoughts on that before we get any other answer? Well, any other question, I'm sorry, from the audience, but you could.
Well, let me just maybe very short in that answer. For me, it was when I came to Christ in Japan. So, you know, I was overseas when I became a Christian. So you can see the obvious link there. I think the Great Commission is pretty clear. Okay, so there's no need to reemphasize that. And it doesn't matter if I'm a hairdresser, or if I'm an engineer, or if I'm a carpenter, or if I'm a teacher, or if I'm a doctor or a nurse. My responsibility is very, very clear. I'm a full-time Christian. There's no such thing as part-time discipleship. Okay, so, and I know that's what MACU teaches. That's why I'm teaching at MACU, because that's what we're all about. Okay, so I would say, you know, you go where God leads you. That's why I called it the GPS at the beginning. You know, not everybody should do what Paul did, but he had to do what Paul did. He didn't have any choice. And so, you know, here you are from Venezuela, making an impact in the United States with young men and women that are going all over the world. That's a calling, that's a GPS. I've just learned that when the Lord's Siri says, turn right, you know, there's a wonderful passage in Isaiah that reminds us of this, right? Turn to the right, turn to the left. That's all they need to be taught.
Yes, wonderful. And the beauty of the illustration on having a GPS and the opportunity to have God guiding each step. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, let me remind everyone if I think there's a question coming in. So Scott is saying, Dr. Cragin, as you were speaking, I followed the link you shared about Dwight Nordstrom's principled response to the culture of bribery that has sometimes been prevalent in China. It seems like a very real way of demonstrating Christian ethics in business. As a cybersecurity educator, I'm interested in your perspective about the Chinese government's open support of advanced persistent threat teams, some that exist as a formal part of the Chinese military, whose task is to aggressively disrupt the business operations of competing economies. Do you see any path for establishing a common definition of ethical business practices that would include international policies about cyber warfare.
Wow, it doesn't surprise me that Dwight would have something to say about that. I encourage you to look at his other materials as well. First of all, the issue of international business ethics, you're absolutely correct. Making a difference often is by the way we behave, in contrast to the way others behave. All right, when we teach business, we can either teach it from a materialistic bottom line point of view, which is not scriptural, or we can teach it from an impact, service, love others point of view. Okay, so I was talking with a Christian professor at another university, let me say, yesterday. And I said, well, you teach international business. What do you tell people about when they're being approached with, I'll just make it what it is, a bribe, okay? And he said, well, I tell them that when in Rome, you have to do as the Romans do. I said, what? No, the opposite. Do the opposite. Tell that person, no, I'm a Christian. I can't operate that way. And if I lose the business, I lose the business. Now, with regard to cybersecurity, there's no doubt that's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And the more training we can do on that, the better. I think it is extremely important that we defend ourselves and others from nefarious activities that are going on all the time. But I think it will be really exciting when we do that in a way that demonstrates love and concern rather than I hate you because you did that. Can you imagine the impact that would have? Now, I don't teach that subject, but whoever asked that question, if you do teach that subject and you could come up with a way to include that, you know, it would be fantastic, because I don't know anybody who's doing that yet. So let me encourage you along those lines. We do have laws in the United States that says you cannot operate in another country ethically in any way differently than you would do in the United States. Okay, it's called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And we have to teach that in business. But we don't teach it because it's a law. We teach it because it's the way God would want us to do it.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then as I was listening to you, Dr. Cragin, I was thinking about the fact that I once read a book that it's called Monday Morning Atheists. And it pretty much paints a picture of people not necessarily being able to transfer what they're learning and what their convictions are when they're at church on Sunday into the Monday morning reality. And same thing when it comes to, well, you might be in your church here in Oklahoma or anywhere, but it doesn't matter if you're going to do business here in the US or abroad, still you're going to be accountable to the same principles that apply on Sunday, whatever you worship in your church. So wonderful. Thanks for sharing. So we have another question here from Lisa Bell. Dr. Cragin, you have successfully combined your international business expertise with a strong focus on social entrepreneurship and faith-based initiatives. Given the challenges and high failure rates associated with startups, particularly in the social entrepreneurship sector, what specific strategies do you recommend for budding entrepreneurs who not only survive, but thrive in such a competitive and risky field? Additionally, how do you incorporate these strategies into your teaching to prepare your students for those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely 100% correct. Whoever asked that question knows exactly what they're talking about. The failure rate for social entrepreneurs, or you call them that if you want to, they're non-Christian social entrepreneurs. But anyway, for Christian entrepreneurs that want to use their skill sets to create opportunities to generate self-financing impact businesses, the failure rate is the same. It's 90% or greater. Therefore, it's extremely important that that we teach them how to make sure they don't walk down a path that's headed for failure. Just because it's a great idea doesn't mean it's a great idea. Now, I'm a serial entrepreneur, okay? So I understand what we're talking about here. And I've seen my own set of failures. Investors look for the kinds of data and research that says this can be successful. So you can't just go out and say, I know this will work. So I'll give you an example. There was a gentleman who came up with a plan for Egypt, and he put it in front of some investors. The investors said, no, we don't have enough details there. We need more market research. He went back and did his work. Today, he is manufacturing ice cream makers in Egypt and selling them around the world very, very successfully. 200 employees sharing the gospel. But he was refused the first time, correctly refused, because he hadn't done his homework. And we have that same responsibility. Just because it's for the Lord doesn't mean it's going to be successful. Whoever asked that question, I do build that into my classes. The same thing that I would with any entrepreneurial class is valid for a Christian entrepreneur class.
Well, great. Well, thank you. And we have another question from Makaya Enjibo. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. As a young graduating professional, how do I get in touch with individuals and companies operating within the realm of international business missions? That is an area I'm interested in, but it seems that there is not much visibility for those kinds of companies.
Oh, that's not true at all. And I'm betting that there are people at MACU that could introduce those to you if you just find the right people. I introduced you to one, Lions Den DFW. It's one of the larger ones, but it's one of many, many, many that are out there that are investors who want to put their funds in kingdom work with businesses that make sense. There's also companies out there that are, I mean, think about Hobby Lobby. Okay, it's just around the corner from you. I can name any number of companies within 10 miles of the university that are looking for people to come in and sit down in that interview and say, yes, I'm in marketing, or I'm sales, or I'm production, or I'm engineering. I just want you to know it's important to me to make an impact for Christ. And they say, oh, you're the first one to say that. Okay, don't hesitate. The opportunity is there. And there's, start with your faculty and your leadership on campus, but there are plenty of places that are doing that very thing. It's a hot topic right now. In fact, I'm surprised if you Googled that you wouldn't be inundated with different opportunities.
And so would you recommend then that she just say, I'm interested in working internationally, and how do I get involved in working in your organization overseas or abroad?
Well, it depends on where she is in her studies, but obviously internships matter. Okay, so if you can find a company that is already involved. Now, you speak, let's say you speak Spanish, and there's a company in Shawnee, Oklahoma that does business in Latin America, and you're willing as an intern to go and help. Okay, there are some qualifications that are involved here as well, and you'll need to make sure you get those. But look for opportunities. These so-called short-term mission trips. There's some short-term mission trips out there, quite a few of them actually, that are not focused on just teaching Sunday school, but they're actually focused on starting a business. There's a bunch of them that are out there. And so all I can say is do what I did as a young man. Look for companies that are involved internationally, even if they're not Christian. If you can get qualified and get in that door, do it and go.
And I noticed your emphasis, your concentration in your doctoral work was specifically in Chinese. I don't want to misspeak here. Could you explain your emphasis in your doctoral work? That might be the easiest way to ask the question.
Well, that's why I ended up at OU. Okay. I went to a lot of different schools to try to get in their programs. And what I found when I got to OU was two gentlemen who had transferred from the University of Minnesota's industrial development program that collapsed. And they were so sharp. And I worked for one of them, and the university paid me, so that helped. And it happened that at the time, OU was offering advanced courses in Chinese language. So you put those two together and it helps, okay? Now, obviously I had a lot more language study to do when I got to Hong Kong and other places, but yeah.
So preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah, that's what
And
MACU is
God
all
is
about.
in control.
Yeah. And then pay attention to the GPS.
I love that.
Yes. And you know, and one of the privileges we get to have with professors like you that are also part of the instructors here at Mid-America, and so many other initiatives that we get to bring to a lot of the students here at Mid-America. We normally try to do that intentionally. We try to expose them. Nowadays, there's a lot of marketplace ministry movements taking place. I mean, 30 years ago, there were only 3 or 4, but right now there are hundreds of marketplace ministries that are sharing stories of companies or interviewing business leaders. And so if the person that asked this, Mikaya, just go out and plug in, search, and ask here. Some of us, we can lead you to some of those organizations that will definitely help you frame your worldview as a marketplace ambassador, but at the same time will allow you to see perspectives and to get to know people. I always tell people, just show up to events, just listen to what people that are already doing what you envision doing, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and ask questions and try to come close to that. And there's plenty of opportunities, and there's a lot of people willing to open up their companies for those who are interested in doing the same kind of work. They want to join the mission. And that's what I've seen as part of the Christian Economic Forum, of the Faith-Driven Entrepreneur Movement, CBMC, Generosity Path. I mean, there's so many marketplace ministries all over that are combining faith and work and leadership and as an ultimate pursuit and as an ultimate purpose for those who have understood their calling in the marketplace. So beautiful that we get to talk about this topic. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Cragin. We have come to almost a conclusion for today, but we're so privileged to have you and to be able to see where the Lord has taken you for his purposes. And I know it's of encouragement to those who have listened to today and those who are going to listen to into the future. And before we close, I just wanted to comment that we here at Mid-America Christian University in our School of Business Leadership, we're committed to equipping people to do this kind of work. We want people to be able to integrate faith and work and to be able to do, as we earlier mentioned, when we're commissioned globally. Well, I mean, the natural commission that we all get is a global commission, not only a local one. And we're committed to that as part of what we do here in our academic pursuit of equipping those who are going to be out there in the marketplace, and that they may be ready. And we do that through especially 2 of the programs that Dr. Kelly and I represent here at the graduate level. In my case, with the Master of Arts in Leadership, which is a program that is designed for those who decide to be transformative, visionary, global, and servant leaders in a variety of settings. And at the same time, we want to deepen into that understanding of theoretical foundations on how to do not only great work in the organizational setting, but do it from a biblical perspective. And both, innovation and collaboration as part of what we have in the core of what we do, and our programs do that, and also the MBA program that we get to host, and Dr. Kelly is the director for that. have a wonderful opportunity for those who want to do an international emphasis in their education as they get ready for business. There's a couple of things related to culture and laws, and at the same time strategies on how to pursue that in the global scale, which is a completely different ballpark, I would say, than when you do only business locally. And we're so excited to be part of what God is doing in our midst, in us, and through us here at Mid-America. And we're so thrilled to offer that as an option for so many students that are coming in, are graduating, and are being part of this wonderful thing. Dr. Kelly, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to mention before we close.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Dr. Cragin again. And yes, I'm just so thankful to be a part of this community where we can talk about the reach and the ways that God can work through us at home and abroad and everywhere we go. So thank you, Dr. Cragin. Thank you, Dr. San Pedro. And I just want to remind the audience that we are recorded and you can access this on www.macu.edu/leadership-connection. And that way you can share this wonderful topic and all of our other wonderful content with other people. And don't forget to fill out the feedback and participate to win our special gift for that'll help you get included in a drawing. So join us next month. We have an interesting panel discussion next month, right, Dr. San Pedro?
Yes, we do. And it's going to be really exciting because it's going to talk about what are those trends and how can we navigate those trends that are related to HR, human resources, culture, workforce, not only today, but what are the things that are emerging and the many topics that are related to that create an environment that we need to talk about. And we need to be sure that we're standing firm on a few things, but at the same time wise into understanding what's happening and what's about to come in the workforce just in front of us. So, well, thank you so much. And it's been a wonderful privilege to share with you, Dr. Cragin, and thanks for joining us. And thanks for everyone that has joined us today. It's been an exciting time, and we hope you keep connected to this initiative as we do it every month. We have one more to go before we go on a break during the summer and then come back in the fall. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day for all of you that are connected and those who are watching online. Have a great day.